You're listening to the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast, where I'll be giving valuable insight and thought-provoking perspectives about the connections between our hair and how we live our daily lives. I know that many of you have heard people talking about jerry curls and pressing curls, high top fades and sporting waves, the best products for your hair, and so much more. But what you haven't heard is how our hair can be a full reflection of what's going on in our hearts, what's going on in our minds, what's going on in our bodies, and what's going on in our souls. I'm your host, Darius Peace, and I'm excited to be your weekly guide on the journey to having better hair and a better life. Every day gives us another opportunity to be better, another chance to get it right. We were in the salon the other day conversing about school starting again. Yep, summertime is over, and a whole lot of us are preparing for pickup and drop off traffic, back to school supplies, parent teacher nights, and all of the things to do. And while we were talking, one of my team members was discussing how her child's school experiences low enrollment on the first day. And I was like, really? Low enrollment on the first day? Why? And apparently, there are a lot of parents who ignore the reminders about registration or enrollment, and the school has to call and email and remind people back and forth. And so typically the second day of school, you'll see the buses more filled and you'll see the classrooms with more students occupying. But anyway, I just thought that was weird. But she also mentioned how there was a reprimand and a reinforcement of the policies that they have in place regarding dress code. Now, of course, when it comes to student dress code, they can't wear pajamas to school. They can't wear slide-in shoes like Crocs and all that stuff. No bonnets, hats, just that midriff tops, all that stuff. But it wasn't the children that are experiencing this reprimand or reinforcement of dress code. It's also parents. And I was like, parents? So, unfortunately, it hasn't been uncommon to encounter parents coming in, like I'll say daddies coming in with pants hanging off their asses, sagging, smelling like weed, or mamas coming in with satin bonnets and sports bras. And I was like, sports bras? So, and it's just crazy because it's not like these women are coming to school to play volleyball, or they're not doing anything active anyway. So I'm like, why are you wearing a sports bra out in public, especially when you don't play sports? But anyway, I got this thing when it comes to, I'm going to focus on the daddies for a minute before I get back on the mamas and the bonnets. But, coming to school smelling like weed, your pants down, pull your pants up, but smelling like weed, that's always been a hygiene thing to me. Like, I should not smell what you have done before you came around me. So, if you just got finished working out at the gym, I shouldn't smell that you've worked out. I shouldn't smell you smelling musty, or I shouldn't smell if you just got finished having sex. I don't need to smell you smelling like in between somebody's legs, or I don't need to smell your marijuana. Like, that's too much. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that and these bonnets and all that right after a word from our sponsor. We'll be right back, y'all.
Visit HayaBeauty.com. That's HAYAH beauty.com, or give us a call 205-703-8022 for questions, for information, or to book your appointment.
Beauty can take you higher. The mission is to inspire. I am, I was, and I always will be. Beauty higher. Beauty can take you higher. The mission is to inspire. And I always choose to start my day with higher, higher beauty.
Did I just say smelling like in between somebody's legs? Y'all got to stop me. This is too much. Anyway, I shouldn't smell that on you. And, Now, it goes without saying that satin bonnets were designed and created to preserve hairstyles while in the house so that it's polished and prepped for going outside. So, wearing a bonnet outside of the house, in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people share the same opinion, can be an indicator of low class, laziness, messiness, and I ain't just talking about having a messy home, but even a messy life, just being messy, gossipy, all that stuff, and not being aware of having something to lose. I know that this is sounding like it's coming from a very critical and judgmental place. Stay with me, because I'm going somewhere with this, but it is coming from critique and judgment. I don't have a problem with judgment. I think that in a lot of cases, when people hear the word judge, they demonize it and make it something bad. But what I believe about judgment is that there's no correction without it. Like, that's why we have judges to hold people to a better or a higher standard of accountability in any endeavor. And so I don't have a problem with judgment. People are always saying, "Oh, you shouldn't judge. Don't judge. I don't like to be judged." And I don't think that it's the judgment that is the problem. I think that in many cases it's the condemnation that follows the judgment that will throw a lot of people off, because the judgment is necessary. There is less likely to be a standard of justice, a standard of accountability, one that's heightened anyway, without the judgment. It's the condemnation that usually takes people down through there. So, of course, as a hair care professional, it's my duty to stand for all things that can be done to help best preserve and protect our hair and styles all the time. But satin bonnets being worn outside in public is where I draw the line. And that's where my judgment does come in. And that's where my condemnation comes in. I think that there's a time and a place for everything. And the time and the place for wearing a bonnet is either at home, before bed, or when there's nothing else to do. So, just to be clear, I'm aware that some people may not know any better. But ignorance is not always bliss, and our opportunities for advancement and experiential exposure can be limited by this type of ignorance. And I'm talking about, exposure. I know that sometimes when we're not exposed to something different, that's what I mean by experiential exposure. When we're not exposed to different experiences and different people and places and things, that can put a limitation on how we behave and what we do. And if we're only limited to the exposure of our common or our normal surroundings, that's what we do. That's what we put out there. So people who are wearing bonnets out in these streets are probably doing so because that's what they're used to seeing. That's the normal trend or the popular fashion trend where they are, which is typically in more impoverished, economically impoverished areas. That's where you'll see a lot of this behavior taking place, just wearing bonnets out in public. I remember being at Walmart once and seeing a woman. It was, matter of fact, it looked like three generations. It looked like a grandmama, it looked like a mama, and it looked like a daughter, all walking in Walmart together with bonnets on. And I was like, wait a minute. It was too much for me. It was too far for me, because I thought that image is what perpetuated the notions of laziness and low class and messiness and just all of that impoverishment. I just thought that was an indicator of all those things. And so, anyway, as I said, ignorance ain't always bliss. And so we got to get it together with that. But what it did, and what this overall conversation reminded me of, especially when it came to the reprimand of parents for dress, it made me think about just exposure and opportunity. I went out to eat at a sit-down, dine-in restaurant for the first time when I was in the 7th grade. I had just placed first chair red band in our local honor band competition, and I was so proud of myself for doing so. And so was my middle school band director, Mr. Rowe. I was the only one in my school to make it to the honor band, and as a reward, after we had our final performance with the honor band, my band director took me to a restaurant. Now, he had no idea that I had never gone to a sit down dine in, what I call fancy restaurant before. But in hindsight, in my 40 something year old mind, I can see that, I'm sure that he probably picked up on my background to know that it was less likely a common occurrence for me to be going out to eat at certain places. And anyway, I was nervous and excited at the same time about going to the restaurant because I'd never been to one before. And so when we got to the restaurant, I began to feel overwhelmed and just a compound of thoughts of not being good enough to go to what I considered a fancy restaurant. So I was dealing with that. And when we walked inside, the hostess sat us down, and I'm reflecting, not that I'm reflecting deeper. It wasn't just me and my band director. It was my instructor and also another colleague of his from the Honor Band Association. So it was the three of us. And so once we got seated, I asked them if I can go to the bathroom, and they told me that I could. And so they probably assumed that I had to use the bathroom, but I really went in there to cry. I went in there to let out all the tears that had been wailing up in my eyes while we were there. And although I was happy and excited about going to a restaurant, I was also sad because I thought that I did not belong. I felt embarrassed for not having enough or for not looking like I belong because I didn't have more stylish clothes or a richer home background. I felt like an imposter, or I didn't know that word at the time, but that's what I was feeling when I look back at this. This just me being introspective on this memory as an adult man. But I was embarrassed because I had no restaurant experience. I didn't know what to do with a menu. I didn't know how to order from a menu, and it seemed like a lot to take in since most of the items that were on the menu were not a regular at my house. So Mr. Rowe, my band director, suggested that I try the chicken fettuccine Alfredo. And I was like, okay. And by the way, we were at the Olive Garden. Now, I know that the Olive Garden has kind of lost its luster over the years, but back then, early 90s, 1991 ish, it was a very nice place, especially to me. Shit, it was far beyond what I expected to do following the performance. In fact, it was beyond what I expected to even be able to do. Going to a fancy restaurant, and I put fancy in quotes, felt out of reach and inaccessible for me. It seemed like something that I wasn't able to do. And it's interesting because I keep, differentiating thoughts and feelings. You can always tell when somebody has been to somebody's therapist or sat on somebody's clinical couch because they'll always differentiate thoughts and feelings. One of the things that we learn in therapy is that your thoughts are, I think that you try to offend me, or I think that you are blah blah blah, and I feel bad because blah blah blah. And so I'm always thinking when I'm using thoughts and feelings in reference to whatever the other is. So anyway, just disregard that or not disregard that. That's just one of the things that you learn in therapy. And if you've never been to therapy, go to therapy so you can learn about differentiating thoughts and feelings. But I don't, but back to the going to the fancy restaurant. So I don't remember being directly taught that a fancy restaurant was out of reach or inaccessible for me. But that's how I felt bad for thinking that I was not worthy, and I didn't feel like I was worthy of being there. And although I had just placed in the highest ranking in a local music competition, I didn't feel qualified to be in this restaurant. Because I didn't think I had enough money, or I didn't think I had enough prestige. I didn't think that I belonged. And the crazy thing is, as I said before, nobody ever told me this or said that I should feel this way or think this way about myself. It was something that was in me. And I don't know whether I do know that there are influences just that were around me that led to this behavior and thought process, but nobody ever came out and directly said, Darius, you're not worthy of doing certain things, or Darius, you're not worthy of going certain places. In fact, I grew up post civil rights movement, far post civil rights movement, where black people protested for opportunities for equity and equality. And, I know these things, but in my mind, I still held strong to the notions of not belonging in this fancy restaurant. Anyway, once they brought the food out, though, all of my internal issues, my dramas, traumas of self worth went right away because the smell of that hot, bubbling fettuccine Alfredo, preceded by this amazingly zesty, delicious Italian salad, coupled with this soft, melt in your mouth garlic bread, these breadsticks, it took me to a whole other world, y'all. And it was everything. I will never forget the first taste of it because it was unlike we weren't eating fettuccine Alfredo at my house. We were eating Chef Boyardee and regular spaghetti and not even spaghetti with the spaghetti sauce on the top of the noodles because my mama used to mix all of it together. And so anyway, I brought this. I thought about all of this when we were talking about the inappropriate dress code issues and that in some of the schools here in Birmingham, Alabama, what they were experiencing, and the women bringing their kids to school dressed in bras and bonnets, and daddies coming in smelling like marijuana with their pants hanging out their asses, and we typically behave like this when we think that we don't have anything to lose, or when we're completely unaware that there is something to lose, and just that or not being exposed to anything beyond that. That's what triggered that thought of me not feeling worthy or good enough at the Olive Garden, because I would think that when people come outside like that, if you're coming to school dressed in a sports bra and a bonnet, it's because you don't realize that you have anything to lose. And it really is an indicator of lower self-worth, low values. And the same with guys coming in perpetuating negative stereotypes, pants sagging, smelling like weed, like that. That's all coming from that place of low self-worth. So that's what took me there. And although my story of not feeling worthy of going to a fancy restaurant at the time is it's directly linked to this for me. I know a lot of people may think, oh, that seems kind of off, but it doesn't seem off at all to me because it all goes back to a root of low self-worth and not thinking that you belong to anything outside of that impoverished norm or that low place. And it's interesting because one of the negative side effects of the mental illness of low self-worth, and I do consider that a mental illness because I don't think that we were created to think low of ourselves or feel bad about ourselves. Matter of fact, I think that this low self-worth is what causes us to behave with carelessness, and it causes one to move and operate their lives with a lack of pride, and it causes one to carry themselves with low value and low standards, which is polar opposite of what many of our parents and grandparents, especially those who were active in protest with the civil rights movement, and even if you weren't active in the protest thereof, you still had a standard of pride about yourself, especially because the world around you was beating you down so badly. I began to think about the exposure and how me being exposed to different opportunities is what's inspired me to always move in the direction of better in every area of my life. It was the opportunity of music and being exposed to that world that led me to practice and perform with excellence, resulting in me placing at the top of the honor band competition, which also led me to continue being a top performer all throughout my high school career and consequently landing me scholarships for college and all of the wonderful exposure that came with that world. It's exposure, y'all. Exposure. Exposure is a gift. Exposure to different places and different people and different things is what opens our minds and our hearts for advancement. Operating with high standards of excellence is what allows us to both create and attract opportunities of advancement. And this also allows us to bring value to those opportunities that come our way. I believe that many of the individuals who contribute to the perpetuation of negative stereotypes and stigmas, especially in the black community, do so because of little to no exposure of a world beyond their familiar environments. And I know it's challenging to imagine what you've never seen or imagine going where you've never been. But if all you see and know is poverty, then that's what you're likely to perpetuate. If all you've seen and known is drama and trauma, then that's more likely what you're going to breed. If all you know is eating greasy, fried, unhealthy foods, then that's more than likely what you're going to continue doing. If you've never visited a zoo or a museum, or a fancy restaurant, then you're likely to believe that it may be inaccessible or unachievable for you to get there. I was talking to one of my guests. Well, we call them whenever I say guests, I'm talking about my clients in the salon. And she was telling me about how her first time getting on a plane was when she was 28 years old. She was working a job in corporate America, and the job was sending her off for more intense training at another branch of the business in a different state. And she was going with another colleague, and she was telling that colleague that she had never been on a plane before, and that this was her first time. And what she learned from that experience was that, you know what, I'm going to embrace this moment. I'm not going to be sad about me being 28 years old and this is my first time ever being on a plane, but just, embrace this moment of change and know that it's really ushering me into a different world and a new life and exposure to different people. And of course, this person since then is, advanced by far in her company and in her position because of all of this travel. And so, I mean, that's just one of it's the exposure, y'all, like that really allows us to grow and advance in every area of our lives. And I know that it's easy to condemn and destructively critique what we believe casts a dark cloud on the black race, on our race and our society. But again, sometimes it's due to a lack of exposure and opportunity. And don't get me wrong, everybody ain't ready for exposure and opportunity beyond what's normal for them. I'm clear about that. But for those who are, I am dropping a few gems in this episode that I think can just help position us and ourselves for a different showcase of exposure and opportunity, which I think will lead to an overall advancement in our general lives. So, I like to do these things in steps, because steps are easy for us to remember. So, number one, and this is all for just positioning yourself for more exposure, more opportunity. One, get uncomfortable. A lot of times we miss out on opportunities for what I call experiential exposure, exposure of experiences, because we're afraid of getting out of our comfort zones. Like we may be comfortable being in Birmingham. We may be comfortable in being in our city. We may be comfortable with being, going to the places that we always go. But let's first just get uncomfortable, because when we experience something different, in many cases it is uncomfortable. Like I was saying, when I was in the 7th grade and going out to eat in that fancy restaurant for the first time, and I'm putting fancy in quotes because again, Olive Garden for me back in 1991, 92, 93 was very fancy. I mean, I had never experienced any, thing like it. And so that was fancy for me. And, I'm sure that fancy is different for different people depending on where they are in life. But that was fancy for me at the time. But I was very uncomfortable. But it was my discomfort in that moment that opened the door for me to do so much more of that. I mean, going out to eat for my children, and my children have been eating out in nice restaurants since they were born. And so that's not, it's not anything abnormal for them, but that was for me. It was beyond my wildest dreams. The only time I saw people and families eating out in fancy restaurants was on TV. And so, that opened the door for me to be able to provide that for my children and really understand the importance of exposure so that, their worlds are more open, more vast, richer, more opportunistic in the best way. So that's one. Just get uncomfortable. Get out of your comfort zone. Number two, open your eyes and your mind to something different from what you're used to. So that could be doing something as simple as changing the radio station to a different genre of music, change the TV station to a show or series that's different from what you're used to watching, or because this can expand your range of conversation when you're talking to different people, which can also expand your range of influence, opportunity, and overall exposure. So, just changing the channel. Even changing the direction that you walk. If you're walking in a certain direction as a form of exercise, change it up. Because again, it just opens your conversation. That's that, and that allows you to be able to speak with more range when you're dealing with people. Speaking of conversation, number three, start a delightful and productive conversation with somebody different from you. Different means it could be an older person, it could be a younger person. It could be a person of a different race, a person of a different religious background, a person of a different lifestyle orientation, just someone different from you, because you'd be surprised at how this can create a different exposure opportunity, a different experiential opportunity for you. And number four, go to the library. Y'all, you'd be so surprised at what the library has to offer. I know a lot of people may think that the library is obsolete in this age of digital everything, but y'all, it is not. The library is so full of exposure opportunities that are free. Like, I know that in Birmingham, Alabama, our local library gives free tickets to orchestral and symphony performances. You can access free tickets to opera performances and theater performances. You can experience hip hop and punk rock concerts at the library. You can meet people from all walks of life. You can experience different art exhibits in the library. I mean, y'all, it's a big world in the library, and it's this exposure that allows your world to become better, which can allow our overall world to become a better place for all of us, in which all of us can have to exist and can exist. So I just think that we become more tolerant of what is different, and we also become more attractive in our allure of overall advancement. So again, it was the salon topic of women or bonnets, women wearing bonnets, bonnets being worn at the wrong place at the wrong time, that triggered a deep moment of introspection for me that led to this conversation with you. Ladies, stop wearing these bonnets out in public. Show your tresses, because your hair ain't nappy and my hair ain't nappy either. Until next time, y'all.
Speakers, coaches, experts, and entrepreneurs. Whether you're keynoting events, growing your business, or commanding the boardroom, you are highly skilled and accomplished at what you do. But something's missing. You don't have a cohesive brand to match your level of success. But not to worry, that's where we come in. We're Honeysuckle Lane Creative Co., and we create stunning visuals that capture the essence of your business and give you the online presence of your dreams. With a full suite of creative services, including photography, web design, graphic design, and marketing strategy, we make sure you're as extraordinary online as you are in your area of expertise. Ditch the DIY and work with an experienced team that gets results. Find us online at honeysucklelanecreative.com and on Instagram at honeysuckleLane_creative. Let's bring your brilliance to life with an unforgettable brand.
Thank you for listening to the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. Reach out to us on social media. We're on TikTok and we're on Instagram at the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. We want to hear your stories. Until next time, love you and love your hair.